Hello and welcome to another episode of Learning to Live in the Present Moment. My name is Ted Robinson and I'm your host today. So today I'm going to talk to you about the ego and what it is, because it's really a bit of a conundrum. Most people think that when you talk about their ego, you're saying that they're being egotistical. Like, look at me, I'm the best. They're all filled up with themselves. But that's not what the ego is. It is partly that, but it's not really the whole picture at all. The ego actually is very difficult to define, but it's sort of like what Judge Learned Hand said about pornography from the Supreme Court. He says, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Now, here's how I would define the ego. The ego is the part or a part of your conscious mind that is in charge of keeping all of your prior beliefs, all of your prior judgments intact. Keep them intact and not let them go. Why? Because every time you've made a choice in life, every time you've had an experience in life, you've had to make a choice. Let me explain. When you're a little child and people say, no, don't do that, why are they doing that? They're doing it because they want to protect you. They don't want you to get injured or hurt. But how many times have we all heard the word, you just have to learn the hard way, don't you? And the answer is yes, all of us learn the hard way at some point in time in our lives, because we have to do it by what we call trial and error. But I would tell you there's no trial and error. There's never an error. There's just things that you choose to like and choose that you don't like. If we say, I don't like that, we call it an error, but it's not an error at all. It's simply a way of us saying, geez, that hurt. I put my hand on that hot radiator, on that hot stove, and I don't like that. My hand was burned. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. Now, which part of us does that? The ego. It says, I'll never let you get hurt again because I want to make sure you're safe at all times. It's a pretty reasonable thought, right? Nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's nothing wrong with the ego at all. How about that? How about that for a controversial statement? But what I mean by that is the ego itself is there to protect you. It's there to help you. And its primary purpose is to judge. It judges what you want to wear in the morning as opposed to what you wear thoughtlessly in the morning. How many times have you gone out and said, what did I put this together for? Well, it helps you judge what you want for dessert, what you want for dinner or lunch. And all of these things are judgments. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with making judgments. In fact, you couldn't live in this world if you didn't make judgments. You'd just be, I don't know. What do you want? What do you want to eat? I don't know. You know anybody like that? I do. And is it wrong for them to say that? No. There is no right and wrong with any of this. It's just happens. Things happen. And then there are results. That's all. There's nothing wrong with any of it. However, we can be a lot happier if we start to notice our ego more often, if we become mindful of it. And I'll explain all about that in just a moment. But let me tell you more about the ego first. The ego also is in charge of taking your mind into the past and the future. So whenever you're in the past or in the future, you can tell that you're in your ego mind, your conscious mind at that time. Let me explain that. When you're busily regretting, lamenting, or wishing you were still back in high school or grade school or wherever, that's your ego. When you're busily making plans and anticipating the future, that's your ego. Now, neither of those two are wrong in any way. But just like with judgments, when you start to get overtaken by the ego, when the ego keeps you only thinking about the past or the future, that's the problem. And it does become a real problem. Now, most people who say, well, what's wrong with the past? I love the past. I'm going to stay in the past forever. Nothing whatsoever wrong with any of this. You can do all that if you want to go into the future and keep your mind set on the future, the future, the future. Nothing wrong with that. But in both instances, they have ramifications to your life. Because if you keep your life so in your mindset all in the past or all in the future or both, you miss the present moment. You're not here right now. Now, that's what I really want to get to. The present moment. Remember, the name of this show is Learning to Live in the Present Moment. So I'll be back in just a moment to tell you all about the present moment and how it affects and is affected by the past and the future and your judgments, all of which are part of the sphere of the ego. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Welcome back. So the present moment is just very simple. It's just now. This is the present moment right now. Oh, and here it is again. Ah, and here it is again. It's that immediate. Those present moments that I just said a moment ago are now the past. This is the present moment. Oh, this is the present moment. Wait a minute. Here it is, the present moment. Now, why do I'm sort of making a joke of it, but the fact of the matter is, it's only for now. But here's the real, true crux of it. And most people have never heard this before. So I suggest you listen very carefully. The present moment is the only time you are alive. It's the only time that is real. That's important. I'm going to repeat it. The only time you are alive is in the present moment. The only time that is real is now. Let me explain. The reason you're only alive now is because this is all that there really is just now. Everything else in the past is just your memory. Everything in the future is your imagination, both of which come from your mind. They are not real. Let me explain. What you anticipate is not yet manifest. It hasn't occurred. So if you're expecting to go out on your boat or have a picnic on Sunday and it's a rainy day, you probably won't go. So it's not yet manifested. It's not real. It's an expectation. You're imagining how wonderful it's going to be. Have you ever had a date and think, wow, this is going to be the best date of my whole life, and it turns into a debacle? And other times it turns into the greatest date you've ever had. But none of it's real until it actually happens. And you can't even evaluate it until it actually happens. Now, the past is the same thing, only reversed. The past is just your recollection, recently recalled, but it's just your recollection. And guess what? You can only see just so much of your experience, right? I can't see that painting behind me or the plants on either side of me. I really believe they're there, but until I look, I'm not sure. Am I? You were sure because you could see it now. I couldn't see it at all. So I would anticipate, expect, and believe that they're all there because I remember them being there before I started the show. But what happens if somebody just takes them out? I turn around and nothing's there. All I'm pointing out to you is that only now is important. When I can reach out and touch it, feel it, see it, smell it, taste it, hear it, those are real. So if you can see it, feel it, taste it, touch it, or smell it, it's real. If you remember the smell, that's just a recollection. How many times have you recalled the smell of something and then you smell it again and it's just a little different? Maybe your taste buds are a little different. Maybe it was made a little differently. Maybe it's not as fresh as it was when you tasted it originally. All those things happen. You ever gone into a diner and said, I want a piece of lemon meringue pie? The fork always went right through the meringue and right through the lemon, and you get there and it's rubbery. It's not what you thought it was going to be. It's not what you expected or anticipated it to be. It's what it is. So when you hear people say, it is what it is, baby, that's what they're referring to. You can have all the expectations and recollections and everything else, but it is exactly what it is when you're there. That's the present moment. Now, this is the present moment as we speak right now. As you're watching a videotape of what I'm saying. But for us right now, this is the present moment. If your children or your spouse is not with you in this moment, you don't have them at all. You have a recollection of them. You have an anticipation of them, but you don't have them. So, why am I going into all this depth? Because I want you to understand the ego is comprised of all of these things that we rely upon 98% of our lives, maybe more. Most people are not present at all. They whip their phone out, and they're looking at their phone, they're doing all, they're not present. They're not really here with what's here. Now you might say, well, their phone is here. That would be true. But their mind is clocked in elsewhere, into the cloud perhaps, into their computer. But they're not really here any longer. And that's the whole point. The ego is not about being here. It's about the past, future, or judgment. And what happens is most of us live our lives almost entirely in our ego. And that's the problem. Why is it a problem? Because when you get so caught up in the past or the future or judgments, you're too busy to be here now. And so the time that you're here alive, the time that's allotted for this lifetime for you, is being taken up by your mind, taking you out in the past, taking you out to the future, taking you out in judgments, even of yourself. Instead of just being here, just being. And that's the essence of what I'm here to talk about. It took me a while to get here, right? But the bottom line is, can you be here now more of the time? Can you just be here without looking at something or thinking of something or judging everybody? Can you do that? I believe you can, but I don't believe you can do it all the time. Like I've said in other shows, I think you have to pick your spots. Pick the times to be present. Pick when you're going to be present and then be present. Now, that comes from mindfulness. When you start to become mindful of the ego and all the machinations of the ego, then you can be more present. And I'll be back in a moment to explain that to you. Don't go away. Welcome back. So, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is a way of watching your ego, watching your mind. Now, which part of you is doing that? Of course, it's your own mind. Your own mind will watch your mind, but it's going to watch the ego part of your mind, the conscious mind. So there's sort of like a watcher that sits up here watching what goes on. I watch myself when I drive because I find that I'm judgmental when I drive. Like I said, I'm working on this too. I'm learning to live in the present moment. So when I drive, I get my watcher out and I watch myself be judgmental. That guy could have made the left. Why are we sitting here at this light? He could have made it. He could have made it. He could have made it. It's just my judgments. After a while, I say, I see what I'm doing. I'm just judging. Now, what does that do for me by doing that? Why does becoming mindful matter? Because as soon as I start to watch my ego judging somebody else, didn't make the left, didn't make the left, didn't make the left. Why is that guy double parked? As soon as I see myself doing it, it loses all of its power. It loses all of its strength. It takes the energy out of it. And why is that important? Because I don't want to be a judge all the time. I don't seem to be able to control it all the time either. So by watching it, I withdraw the energy from it, and it collapses of its own weight. It's just gone. When I say, I see what I just did again, the next time somebody doesn't make the left, I go, okay, I'm just going to be here. And I become present. I just sit there quietly and wait. And if the person finally goes through when the light is already red, I sit there and wait, and I don't pound the steering wheel any longer. I just watch it all happening because I'm no longer here in my ego screaming and shouting and why didn't he, and taking it all very personally when that guy up front doesn't even know I'm here. He could care less. He's worried about his own safety. He's worried about the safety of his family in the car, and that's all understandable. It's me, my ego, that's causing all the ruckus, and there's where we get into trouble. It's our egos that cause all the ruckus. When we don't like what we're getting, or we don't like when we don't get what we want, our ego starts pounding the wheel, starts screaming our head off, starts being sarcastic, starts being an egomaniac. That's when you can see the ego clearly. But you can see it a lot earlier, before it takes on so much energy. Now remember, one of the primary reasons it's so important to do this and to withhold all this energy from the ego is because the energy of the ego is pretty negative most of the time. It's pretty much all about me, my, mine, and what can you do for me? And why isn't the world responding to me? It's all about me. And it's all about you when you're in your ego. And what happens is we get poisoned by it, we get upset by it, we get toxins released into our bloodstream as we get angry and hurt and depressed and worried. All these things are because of our ego making judgments about our lives. It shouldn't have been that way. How come it's happening to me? Why me? It's actually laughable when you can stand back and look at it. But when you're in the midst of it, it feels like the end of the world. That's always the ego. It's always the ego. And the beauty is, the antidote to the ego is the watcher. Watching the mind, becoming more watchful of your own ego, becoming mindful. When you're mindful, you see the ego for what it's doing, and you just notice it. You don't have to try to stop the ego. Because I can tell you this right now. If you try to stop the ego, it's your ego trying to stop your ego. It will not happen. You will lose if you try to fight the ego. Don't try to fight it. Just observe it. When you observe the ego, you will see it clearly, and it will know it's being seen. And as soon as it sees that you're watching it, it'll stop. It just stops. You don't have to do a thing. It just stops. It doesn't like being seen doing its petty little stuff that it does all the time. Pounding that wheel. Why did he make the left? Why did she have to stop in the middle of the road? Why do they put their emergency brakes on in the middle of the highway? All these are just our judgments, my judgments, and I presume many of yours. So you can change your judgments just by watching them. As soon as you go to pound that, I see what you just did again, ego. You almost got me. You almost sucked me in again to getting upset, angry, outraged, enraged. I don't have to. I just can observe some person doing whatever they're doing. I can still even judge them sometimes, but I don't have to judge them harshly. I can see what they did. Oh, look at that again. Now, as soon as I do that, you hear the emotion in there. As soon as you hear that emotion, you know the ego has a handle on it. Oh, look at them again. They did it again. Judgment. Anytime you're judging others, anytime you're judging yourself, anytime you're caught up in the past or future, you're in your ego, and it's going to start causing you problems. Physical, emotional, and even spiritual problems. Because it's always, it's not enough. It's not right. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And the complaints start. You get stuck in your story of victimhood. You get stuck in your story of being a bully. You get stuck in your story all over the place. All these stories that we make up for ourselves are what keep us in our ego. And the antidote, become the watcher. I can't see my hand right now, but it sees my ego. I can't see it, but it can see me, that part of me that's the ego. And that's, as soon as the ego kind of creeps out like a tortoise's nose, it goes, "Huh!" and pulls back. That's what you want. Pull that ego back in. Stop the judgments. Stop getting stuck in the past or future. And just be here now. When that happens, you are becoming awakened in the moment. You become awakened, an awakened being in the moment that you are present. Because your mind is quiet. That's how you can tell if you're in presence. Your mind is still. It's not yakking away. It's not thinking about it. It's not whistling a tune. It's just still. And the moment that happens, you're immediately awakened. You go, and then the next thing happens and you're pounding the steering wheel again. But it's okay. You've at least done it once. And that means you can do it again and again and again. But do not practice. Stay away from practice, because that's just the mind trying to figure it out and trying to get it right. Just quiet the mind through mindfulness and be here now, and you'll be in the present moment. That's how you get to the present moment. And when you live in the present moment, you live in peace and serenity. That's really cool. It's a great place to be. And you can stay there as long as you want. So that's about it for now. I want to tell you, by the way, I want to remind you that we here at the Center for Inner Healing, which is where this is being shot right now, on Wednesday nights we have a thing called a Tapathon, and you're invited. You can come between 7 and 9 p.m. Just call our office first at 516-248-6600. That's 516-248-6600. And you can also look us up on the internet at centerforinnerhealing.com. That's all one word, centerforinnerhealing.com. And you can find out all about our Wednesday night group here and our Sunday night tapathon and many of the other things that we do here. We offer all kinds of seminars. We have many books and CDs and videos available to the public. And if you go to that site, you'll find all that stuff. And it's all available to help you become more present and to learn to live in the present moment. So that's about it for now. I want to also tell you that when you use your ego, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not trying to eliminate your ego. Your ego is there to maintain, to go back to the very beginning, to maintain all of your choices that you've made throughout your life. Choices not to put your hand on the stove, not to drive too fast, not to drive drunk, and lots of other things. So there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is it sometimes locks you in so tightly that you can't make any changes when you need them and when you want them. You know, it might not work anymore to never date a boy because you got overthrown on your, or refused the first time you asked somebody to go to a class dance. So these are things that can be overcome using hypnosis, using emotional freedom technique, and using presence. When you finally start to realize that, you can start to let down some of the walls that the ego has established and start to make changes in your life, which is exactly the whole idea of living in the present moment. Because as you live in the present moment, life naturally unfolds for you. It just unfolds before you like a banquet, and you can get to pick and choose whatever you want then. That's the idea of presence. Because as you're present, you are naturally a part of the world. You're naturally a part of everything that's here with you. And by the way, not to be too overly spiritual sounding, but everything that's here is God. God is omnipresent. God is everywhere all the time. So when that's the case, when you finally get that that's the case, you become part of God knowingly, consciously, when you're present. That's the ultimate way of being present. That's why I talk about this. That's what I choose to do whenever I can. But again, pick your spots. Pick the times and places when you can be present. Walk in the park. Walk down the street. Just sit down in a chair and look out. You can be present in any way whatsoever you want. Look at a plant. Just be there with something, anything that's here with you. You can be present with it, and it will literally change your life. I hope this has been helpful today, and we'll be back the same time, same place, next week as we learn to live in the present moment together. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.